Shalom Aleichem. Hope everyone had a wonderful, wonderful week. This week in Chutz La'aretz, we learn Parshas Bahar. In Eretz Yisrael, we learn Parshas Bechukosai. And before sharing a quick Dvar Torah that'll combine both, just wanted to share with everyone, remind everyone that Be'ez Hashem this Sunday, the Yeshiva is going to be undertaking a major fundraiser. We want to raise money for scholarships to enable every single boy who wants to get to Mevaseret, have that deep, growth-oriented Mevaseret experience, joining that growth-oriented chevra to join us next year. So please, we'll be calling on people to help us build our scholarship fund in a meaningful way, and please be aware that that's on the horizon. Thank you so much for all of your help. Parshas Bechukosai, Parshas Bahar. We find sometimes in this week's Parsha Bechukosai we're told about the Tochacha, and we're told terrible Tochacha, but it's not the only time. We have a Tochacha here, we have a Tochacha in Parshas Kisavo, and the Gemara Maseches Megillah Daf Lamed Aleph notes that the Tochacha here in Bechukosai is B'lashon Rabim, in Bechukosai Telechu. In Parshas Kisavo it's B'lashon Yach, and we find this elsewhere as well. You have a mitzvah in Parshas Bahar. V'safart alecha, you shall count 7 cycles of Shemitah as you count towards the Yovel year. V'safart b'lashon Yachid. We have a mitzvah Sfiras Omer, Lag BaOmer, Be'ez Hashem, coming up, we just had. And Lag BaOmer, the mitzvah Sfiras Omer, Usfartem lochem. It's plural. When it comes to counting years of Yovel, singular. V'safarta. When it comes to Sfiras Omer, Usfartem lochem. By Sfir, it also says Shiva Shabbosos Tisparlach, singular. So sometimes singular, sometimes in the plural. When we take a lulav, ulakachtem lochem b'yom harishon, that's singular. And the Gemara that's plural. And the Gemara notes in all of these places that when the Torah gives us a mitzvah in the plural, the Torah is speaking l'kol echad ve'echad, to Reuven, to Shimon, to Levi as individuals. We're told ulakachtem lochem shitei l'kicha l'kol echad ve'echad usfartem lochem 49 days Sfira l'kol echad ve'echad. However, sometimes the Torah speaks in the Lashon Yachid. V'safart l'cha, count towards Yovel, 7 Shemitah cycles. That's not an individual chiv. That's not a chiv on me, on every single individual. There the Torah is speaking to Bnei Yisrael in general, to the klal, and that's the singular. When the Torah tells us Shiva Shabbosos Tisparlach, that's telling us when we should establish Chag HaShavuot. That's a din in Bezdin, to go and establish the Yontif by counting 7 weeks. That might be a separate halacha. So what we find is, again, when the Torah speaks in plural, it's speaking to every single individual. When the Torah speaks in singular, it's speaking to corporate Klal Yisrael. That's the Tochacha in Parshas Kisavo. We're about to enter into Eretz Yisrael. As we're about to enter into Eretz Yisrael, we need to speak to the Klal, what's going to happen, what we're going to have to do as we build our nation going into Eretz Yisrael. When it comes to other parts, we are speaking as Yechidim, as individuals, and Hashem has instructions and directions, and yes, Chas v'Shalom, Tochachos, as individuals. And these represent 2 core fundamental powers that we have as Jews. On the one hand, we stand as Yechidim, and we have tremendous koach as a Yachid. I shared with the boys a story that happened, that I experienced, that where I saw in myself the koach of a Yachid. I was in law school, and there were a professor who was a frum Torah knowledgeable Jew gave a shir on a topic open to everyone, and some non-religious young men joined the shir as well, and I saw they weren't really following so well, so I invited them to learn with me privately. And one of them continued with me. The other one kind of dropped off after a few times, but this second one who continued, we learned over a long period of time. And today, Baruch Hashem, from family, children, doing big things, you never know the koach of a yachid and how that spills over after years, generation after generation. It has a tremendous impact. And then, of course, the impact of tzibur. When we go ahead and have a collective and the power of tzibur. I was actually speaking to someone who shared with me they were stuck with COVID in a foreign country. And all of a sudden, they weren't alone. They weren't alone because there's this tzibur called Knesset Yisrael that we're all in it together. And she's in a community away from family, fully taken care of by strangers, not strangers. Because when you're part of a collective, you're part of a tzibur. The power of considering people outside of yourself, knowing that you're part of something so much bigger. That's the lesson of the Torah in both of these aspects. Sometimes we stand as Yechidim, but we're also part of a much bigger, more powerful group. And that's a very comforting thing. It's a very real thing. is that we should understand our koach as a yachid, but also understand the phenomenal power of tzibur. And that's why the Torah speaks to us both as yichidim and as part of a collective. Have a wonderful Shabbos Kodesh.